So we're going to continue tonight. There's two ways to follow. If you're using the Art Scroll Gemara that went out, in the beginning of the Gemara in the front, it would be Chav Zayin Amud Beis, Chav Zayin Amud Beis. If you're using it, again, not all the way in the back because you don't want to go into Maseches Midos, but if you're in the back, in the standard Art Scroll elucidation, it would be 27b1. So 27b1 in the back, Chav Zayin Amud Beis in the front. So let's see, the last thing the Gemara talked about was the Mishnah that said that the Kohanim, the young Kohanim who were sleeping on the floor in the Beis Hamikdash, they would fold up their big day kahuna and they would put them under their heads and they would sleep like that. And then the Gemara said it can't mean that they put it under their heads because then that would raise the whole question of whether or not you're allowed to benefit from the big day kahuna from the Kohen's clothes when they're not doing avoda. That might enter into the area of Me'ilah, making use of Kodesh property when it's not meant, when we're not allowed to do so, and that can be problematic. So we said it didn't mean they had it literally under their head. Rather, they were folded and they were next to their heads. They had them at their side, ready to go in the morning. And the Gemara concluded on the previous stop by just saying this makes a lot of sense because if the Kohen would have used them as a pillow, he would have had problems. Because the avnate, the belt, there were four begadim, there were four items of clothing that a standard Kohen had. He had the pants, there was a tunic, there was a belt, and there was a special hat or a turban, you might say. So there was four items of clothes for a standard Kohen. The belt, the avnate, according to many opinions, we'll see, had shatnez, had both linen and wool. And that was okay to wear when they were fulfilling the command of the avoda, but if they're not doing the avoda, then that's shatnez. And if they were going to sleep on it as a pillow, then that's a problem too. So now that we came to the conclusion that they didn't actually put it under their head as a pillow, but rather was folded up and at their side, that makes a lot more sense because now they don't get into any problems with shatnez. Speaking of shatnez, this Tuesday night, there's a shatnez event at the Yeshiva Beis Hamikdash. What great timing. It was a special Gezeres HaKasov that the Kohen's avnate, the avoda, only during the avoda. That's the only time he was sanctioned to wear it, and there would, so to say, be an exception to the rule of shatnez. But if it wasn't during the avoda, to be benefiting from that item of clothing could be a prohibition of shatnez. That's it. Yeah, that's what comes out. Let's see. You're going to see the Gemara's going to delve into it a little bit more here. But it sounds like no, it wasn't carte blanche. It was only okay as long as it was being used for avoda. Yeah. So let's see. So again, 27b1, if you're in the back, yeah. No, again, earlier the Gemara's problem was not shatnez. The problem was that it was Beis Hamikdash, it was Kodesh property. What right did a Kohen have to make use of this if he's not doing the avoda? What it was intended to be used for was the avoda. So it said, therefore, he couldn't be that he was sleeping on it. It must have been at his side. Then the Gemara says that also takes care of a secondary issue. Is that if he wasn't sleeping on it, now I also got around the issue of how there would have been a shatnez problem. As long as he was using it for the avoda, there's no shatnez problem. But to start sleeping on it, that would have been a shatnez problem. So we avoid that whole issue now. So now let's see, the Gemara says, so it says, the Gemara says, if you just read the Mishnah as is, that the Kohen actually slept on it, that would only work out according to the opinion that held the Kohen Gadol's belt was different than a standard Kohen's belt, meaning that the Kohen Gadol's belt was shatnez, the standard Kohen's belt was not. That would be the only way to explain how you could sleep on top of it. But according to the opinion that says no, just like the Kohen Gadol's belt had shatnez, the standard Kohen's belt also had shatnez. So then, Michael Amemer, why would it have been okay to sleep on top of it? So now that you said he didn't sleep on top of it, rather was folded up and at his side, good, you got out of that problem as well. So now the Gemara is going to say, but one second, maybe there's a way that you could have said it would have been okay, even if it was shatnez, to sleep on top of it. How? Maybe you'll make the argument that the only time that you're not allowed to wear shatnez is if I'm putting an item of clothing on or taking it off. It's that time because the Torah says lo sala Allah, that I'm not allowed to put it onto myself. Maybe that's the only time there's a shatnez prohibition. If it's an item of clothing that gets worn, But if I'm only aval meimach to say shapir dame, but if I fold it up beneath the person, you just sit on it or rest your head on it. In this case, maybe that's not a problem if it's shatnez. So it says no, that's not a way to deal with this. But Tanya, because we learned in a brisa lo yala alacha, when the Torah says that a beged shatnez, a beged, a clothing item that has linen and wool, I'm not allowed to bring onto myself. That only implies that wearing it's a problem. Maybe someone can make the argument that you're allowed to put it under ourselves and we're allowed to sit on top of it or lie down on top of it. The Chachamim said, Asur lasos came, that's forbidden on a rabbinic level. Maybe even one thread of shatnez, granted, even the entire piece of clothing. Let's say a person's lying on it, and now all of a sudden, a breeze comes by, or someone walks by and kicks up a corner, and now part of that blanket's on top of me. So the Rabbanan said, therefore, you're not allowed to lay down. We can't lay down on top of shatnez. It could very easily happen that item that I thought I'm just laying down on could end up on top of me as well. Even if it was just one strand of intertwined linen and wool, that would be problematic. Therefore, on a rabbinic level, that is a problem. So the chitema demasik nidi, but then maybe you'll argue, okay, but you know why it may have been okay, even though you're not allowed to lay down on top of shatnez. The only concern is because the item could come up and come on top of me, blanket me. But what if I have a barrier? Let's say I put those folded up shatnez clothes in a pillowcase. So now they're locked in the pillowcase. There's no way that they're going to end up on top of me. So let's say I had something that was separating between myself and that shatnez. Maybe now it would be okay to lay down on top of it. No, V'amar Rebbe Shimon ben Pazi, or Shimon ben Pazi taught him, or Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Amar Rabbi Yossi ben Shol. This is a phrase I'm not familiar with. Mishum kahala kadisha shebiyerushalayim. He said this over in the name of the holy congregation in Jerusalem. I'm not used to seeing that. A lot of times when someone would say something over what they heard in Israel, they say b'marava in the West. This is what I heard. But this I'm just not familiar with that phrase. But kahila kadosha de Yerushalayim, in the holy congregation in Yerushalayim. Here's something that I learned. What did they say over there? I feel esr matzot zu al gavzu. Even if there were 10 permissible, let's say, blankets or mats, one on top of the next. The kalayim tachtein, and shatnez blanket was all the way on the bottom, so it's 12 layers beneath me. I'm still not allowed to lay down on it. Asr lishan aleim midrabanan. They made a little plug. It doesn't matter if it's the one I'm laying directly on. If it's 20 layers beneath me, I can't lay on it. That's a rabbinic problem. So he's saying, therefore, by saying that the Kohanim were not laying directly on this clothing, that solves all the problems. One last attempt the Gemara is going to say now. Oh, so I'm sorry. No. So what do you see? Neged Rashayan. So it must be that the Kohen never slept on top of the folded up Big Day Kahuna. Rather, what it meant is that he had it next to, folded up and then next to his head. All right, let's see a little further. So now there's another way to make this all make sense. You could say that that the Kohen really did sleep on top of it. But one second, now why isn't that a problem with shatnez? So it says, if you want, you could say, when it's talking about the Kohen folding up his clothes and sleeping on top of it, it's talking about the other 3 items of clothing. Again, we said a standard Kohen had 4 items of clothing. He had the pants, he had the tunic, and he had a hat, and he also had the avnet, the belt. So the avnet, that he didn't sleep on top of. That he may have had off to the side. But the other 3 items, the pants, the tunic, and the hat, those he could have folded up and had under his head as a pillow. That's what he says. If you want, you could say bosun she'ein ben kalayim. The other 3 garments that don't have kalayim, don't have shatnez, that's what he slept on top of. Let's see another idea. Rav Ashi says that really it was the belt, the avnet that had shatnez, and he still slept on it. But what about the shatnez problem? So Rav Ashi has a creative solution. Rav Ashi says, Big Day Kahuna Koshenein. That the Big Day Kahuna, they were very stiff. They were thick. They were stiff. They didn't easily just flap. If someone walks by quickly, all of a sudden it's going to flap over and end up on top of a person. Damar Ravuna, Breder Rav Yeshua, he taught, Ha Namta Gamda Dinarash Sharia. The hard felt, in other words, the felt is, you compress fibers together. So they would make articles of clothing out of felt that was both wool and linen remnants, I guess, that were compressed together, and it was a hard felt. So it says that stuff they were permitted to lay down on top of. Why? According to his opinion. Why? Because there wasn't a concern that it could ever, a breeze would cause it to flap over and be on top of the person. So he says it could be that there was something unique about that avnet. It was a very stiff material, and therefore even that would have been okay. All right, so we see different ideas how to deal with this idea of the Kohen on top of it. Either it never meant he slept on top of it, or what he slept on top of was the other items, not the avnet, or it was the avnet, but avnet was so thick and so stiff, rather, that even that wasn't subject to the Gezerah D'Rabbanan. Okay, so now let's get a little further. The Mishnah now says, the Gemara now says, you see how it's in a parentheses. If you're using the front, you'll see this Tashma part is in a parentheses, but here it's also in a parentheses. Why? So some of the commentaries say that there were some texts that did not have this next paragraph that we're going to see, but it's here. Let's learn it. It says Tashma, come and learn. Big Day Kahuna, when it comes to the Kohen's clothes, this will get a little bit into Rabbi Hauser's conversation. Rabbi Hauser's bringing it up. It's very interesting, forgetting Shatnez, but just the idea that am I allowed to use it outside of the concept of avoda? So let's see. Tashma, Big Day Kahuna, when it comes to the Kohen's clothes, Hayotzi ben Medina, or if a Kohen would keep them on and walk outside of the Beis Hamikdash, meaning go out into the city. That's what it means, Yosef Medina, go out into the province, go out into the city. Usher, no good, not allowed to do that. Why? Because that would be like Me'ila, is that, again, I'm using hektish property for non-avoda tasks. That's not what it was designated for. So it's like it's misappropriation of temple funds and property. Uva mikdash, but within the Beis Hamikdash, meaning anywhere else on Har Habayis, ben b'shas avoda, ben shalom b'shas avoda mutar. It would be okay. He could take his coffee break and go schmooze with his friends, even if it's not during the avoda. He's doing a mundane activity. He's talking to another Kohen in their downtime, in the lunch break. He doesn't have to change out of his Big Day Kahuna. He continues and he says, why? Because Big Day Kahuna, they were given for the benefit of the Kohen. He's allowed to wear them, he's allowed to enjoy them, but even with all that, it seems like just on Har Habayis, not to leave Har Habayis. So Shema Mina, so he says, what do you learn from this? You can learn from this that a Kohen is allowed to use the Big Day Kahuna for his own personal, even if it's not during the Avoda, but again, it's limited just to Har Habayis. So now the Gemara says, but one second, if a Kohen's allowed to use it, so then why did that same Brisa teach of a Medina low? Then why it doesn't make sense. If he's allowed to use it, so then you're telling me he's not allowed to use them outside of Har Habayis? I'll bring you a case. Specifically, we know someone did use it outside of Har Habayis. What was that? So it says, Vatani, we learn in a Brisa, B'esrim v'echad bo, on the 21st day of the month. Now it's a question, which day of the month? Some Girsos have a Kislev, and others do not have Kislev, some have Teves. On the 21st day of Teves, or on the 21st day of Kislev, there was a minor holiday. There was a sefer called Megillas Tainus, that in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, these were recorded days that no one was allowed to fast because of something very impressive, miraculous, you might say, that happened on a national level, and therefore those days were off limits for fasting. So on the 21st day of either Kislev or Teves, that was off limits for fasting. Why? So it says, Yom Har Grizim, that was known as the day of Har Grizim. The Lo Lemispad, no one's allowed to make a very tear-filled eulogy, and you also can't fast. What's the reason? Kirisa biyoma perak bolo kohen gadol. Fine, because of an incident. Now, the Gemara here doesn't record the incident, but what was the incident? The incident was at the time of Alexander the Great. He was marching through the Middle East. He had conquered it, and the Kusim, those were the fellows known as the Shemronim, the Samaritans. They were always a thorn in the side to Klal Yisrael. So they approached Alexander the Great. This is the time of the early time of the second Beis Hamikdash, before the Roman period. And they approached Alexander the Great, and they made a case that the Jews are rebelling against him, and therefore he should give them permission or authorize his troops to destroy the Beis Hamikdash. And Alexander was persuaded by the arguments of the Kusim, and the issue goes out. When a great tzaddik by the name of Shimon HaTzaddik heard about this, he decided he was a Kohen. He wore his Big Day Kahuna, and what did he do? He decides he's going to march out and meet Alexander the Great before he approaches Yerushalayim with a delegation, and to show the respect that he's showing for Alexander the Great. And he was able to convince him not to destroy the Beis Hamikdash and to, in fact, say how loyal the Jews were to Alexander, that we pray for the Malchus, we pray for the government here in the temple, therefore don't destroy it, you'd be doing yourself a disservice. And instead, he was so upset at what happened that the Kusim, the Shomronim, were accusing the Jews, he tells his troops to go to Har Gerizim, which is near modern-day Nablus, that's Shechem, and basically destroy the temple of the Shomronim. That's why it was known as the Day of Har Gerizim. So the Beis Hamikdash was saved, and instead, our enemies that wanted to mess with us, they were destroyed. So the Gemara says, so how did Shimon HaTzadik wear his big dekuna outside the Beis Hamikdash? So the Gemara just says two answers. First answer, big dekuna. It didn't mean he actually wore his real big dekuna. He wore clothing that was so special, that was so nice, his spiffiest tuxedo that he could find. It was something, oh, wow, that was something. If it wasn't that there was a law in the books, what big dekuna had to be, that would have been fit to be big dekuna. The second opinion is the second opinion is that every now and then there are exceptional cases that require, in a sense, the law to be broken. So you're right. That would not have been allowed under normal circumstances to wear big dekuna outside the Beis Hamikdash. However, the Beis Hamikdash was at stake. Alexander was going to destroy it. So therefore, Shimon HaTzadik felt this was an exceptional need. Under these crazy circumstances, he took it on his shoulders. Under these circumstances, the big dekuna could be worn to impress Alexander, save the Beis Hamikdash, save Klal Yisrael, and that's what he did. All right, we'll pause here. By the way, the Gemara in Yoma says that's why there are so many Jewish kids named Alexander. That was Shimon HaTzadik's way to show Alexander that not only are we going to thank you for saving the Beis Hamikdash, we're going to memorialize you. Your name will never go out of style, because we have the habit of naming our kids after deceased parents and grandparents. We'll name all the kids Alexander. For all generations, there will be Alexanders around. Yes. Correct. That's in that same Gemara that I have a vision of that Shimon HaTzadik comes to me in a vision before exactly. It's 100%. All right, we'll pause here. We'll say